All right, everyone, how's it going?
Hey, Q.
Peace,
Pretty
going
good.
good.
Hey, going good. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Super busy, but doing good all the same. So, doing trust in estate today, talking about trust in estate banking, what's going on with trust in estate as far as what assets we're putting in there, how we're moving with the estate, how that plays into the trust aspect at all, and things. What kind of accounts can you open up with these EIN numbers, and a little bit of history. Okay. So if anybody has any questions for about, the first 5 minutes before I start pulling up documents and going over what we're supposed to be doing with these numbers.
Sure. Peace. This is Alif. Can you hear me?
Yep. What's going on, brother?
Oh man, it's going good, man. I'm glad I can join in and get some of this knowledge. You said EINs.
Yes.
As far as with trust banking. Now,
Yes.
when you're dealing with EINs, are we talking about the estate and trust EIN, or are we talking about the 98 numbers?
Well, the 98 number would be associated with the trust.
Okay, that would be foreign banking then, right?
Yep.
Okay, all right. And also, and you're probably going to talk about this as well. Does that include the Form 56?
Yes, it does include the Form 56 as well.
All right, and you're going to give templates, or you're going to show how to actually fill those out?
Oh, those are already in the Patreon group as far as how to fill out.
Okay, all right. That's all I have. Thank you.
All right, no problem. I'll take one more question before I start going over some stuff on trust and estate.
I have one on the estate. If you got an 87 number, is that correct, or was it supposed to be an 86?
As long as you got it as an estate, then it's an estate. It's supposed to be a domestic estate for the purpose of what's going on with the business aspect of things. Okay,
thank you.
No problem. Give me 1 second. So here's this document. So does everybody have a Black's Law dictionary?
Yes.
I don't have it physical, but I got all the
Yeah,
copies.
I got mine.
Okay. So if you don't have a Black's Law dictionary, there's a Black's Law dictionary in the Google Drive. Give me 1 second so I can share my screen with you guys.
Well, as far as the Google Drive goes, in the Patreon group, in the membership, I haven't been able to actually download or actually view some of the documents in there. It keeps telling me I have to log in, but I can't actually log in and see them.
Do you have a Google Drive account so that you can actually look at them?
Yes, I do.
That's all you need.
Yes, I do, but it still wouldn't let me actually view the documents.
Okay, so give me a moment to update on that. All right. I'll just share my screen for the purpose of what we're talking about.
Okay,
so no problem. Okay. So scrolling, this is such a lengthy dictionary. I'm gonna go over what an estate is. All right, in reference to what the hell is going on. So while I'm getting there, pretty much to explain how the estate works. The estate is for decedent purposes, okay? So if you're using, for example, your social security number and you have an estate EIN, just so you're aware, you're using the social security number in a fraudulent sense. Okay, so that means if you're receiving benefits, if you're using it in application purposes, you're using that in the wrong capacity if you don't have proper paperwork filed to be using that in an executor capacity, or at least a trustee capacity. Here we go. So we're looking at estate, all right? Estate, the interest which anyone has in land or in any other subject of property. An estate in lands, tenements, and hereditaments signifies such interest as the tenant has therein. The condition of or circumstance in which the owner stands with regards to his property. In this sense, estate is consistently used in connection with the words right, title, and interest, and is in great degree synonymous with all of them. So, for example, when they're talking about titling, like, for example, the title to your house or the title to your car, the title to your car should be in the aspect of an estate, because the estate is where all the assets lie. A state is synonymous, for example, with state. That's where sovereignty lies, in the estate. Okay. Now, to break this down, what that means is that an estate is for a dead person. So a dead person holds the assets or the title for another, technically speaking. So how does this relate to us? It relates to us in the aspect of what people call a straw man. The straw man.
Quasi,
Yeah.
sorry, there's like this horrible echo. Can everybody mute? It's like this.
Yeah, give me one moment and I'm gonna mute everyone right now. So I'm just gonna go over this one more time just to make sure that everyone can hear me now. So estate, the interest which anyone has in lands or in any other subject of property. An estate in lands, tenements, and hereditaments signifies such interest as the tenant has therein, the condition or circumstance in which the owner stands with regards to his property. In this sense, estate is constantly used in conveyance in connection with the words right, title, and interest, and is in great degree synonymous with all of them. The degree, quantity, nature, and extent of interest which a person has in real property is usually referred to as an estate, and it varies from absolute ownership down to naked possession. Okay. In another sense, estate designates the property, real or personal, in which one has a right or interest, the subject matter of ownership, the corpus of property. Thus we speak of valuable estate, all my estate, separate estate, trust estate, etc. This also is its meaning in the classification of property into real estate and personal estate. Going on, there is no such legal entity as an estate. It is a convenient phrase to identify the subject of litigation in the orphans court and in proceedings in rem. It may be treated as harmless superfluity, but as a designation of a party to be served with a writ, it is unknown to the law. It cannot be made the plaintiff in an action, as it is not a person and cannot be sued, or it cannot sue or be sued. Okay. The word estate and the word of the greatest extension of the and comprehends every species of property, real and personal. It describes both the corpus and the extent of interest. When used in some connection, it signifies everything of which riches and fortune may consist. Estate comprehends everything a man owns, real and personal, and ought right to be limited in its construction, unless connected with some other word which must necessarily have that effect. It means ordinarily the whole of property owned by anyone, the reality as well as the personal, or the realty as well as the personal, sorry. A man's estate is that which he can sell and dispose of at his pleasure, or which he can pass on to another. Okay, and then it explains estates may be either absolute or conditional. An absolute estate is full and a complete estate. Okay, or an estate in the lands not subject to be defeated upon any condition. In this phrase, the word absolute is not used legally to distinguish a fee from life estate, but qualified or conditional fee from a fee simple. Okay, that's a whole lot of jargon if you want to research that. But pretty much what this is explaining is this. When you have property, your property is technically speaking in dead man's hands. So when we're talking about sovereignty, for example, right? When you look up in the dictionaries what a sovereign is, it'll explain sovereign immunities, and then it'll have you see the word state, and they'll let you know pretty much that states are sovereigns, and sovereign immunity means that they can't be sued, and necessarily they can't sue either. So that's what people talk about when they reference, okay, being a sovereign citizen. That's, how do I say, an oxymoron, because you can't be a sovereign and a citizen. What people really mean is that they're a sovereign estate, okay? And a state isn't a person, like it just explained in this definition, which is why it can't sue or be sued. It's just a person who owns title and who can do things with the assets that it has because it owns them in whole or on a conditional basis. So relating to the trust, when you have a trust that holds the assets instead of the estate, what happens is this: it's considered a trust estate, and they work hand in hand with each other. Okay, what happens is this: the trust is more along the lines of like a safe. Okay, meaning that nobody can touch it unless it's an authorized person, meaning the trustee. The trustee works in conjunction with the executor, which is for the estate. That's the person who executes things on behalf of the estate. So you can really think of the executor and the trustee as pretty much being like a man and a woman. Okay. You don't have, they can be either or, it doesn't really matter, but just think of them as a purpose of being a man and a woman in this aspect. So what you're doing is you're conveying your personal property, like the title to your car, your home, your applications, such as, let's say, your birth certificate application, if you can get that, which would be the worksheet, your social security application, your FOIA, pretty much all of your FOIA requests, okay? All those are your assets, okay? So you're going to be placing them inside of your trust with a declared value associated with them, all right? Now, the trust can't necessarily do anything with those assets because realistically speaking, they don't have the capacity to do so. The estate does though, simply because they have the capacity to transfer title to another person, okay? Now, how does this relate to the aspect of the bonds as well? So give me 1 second so I can pull this up. So these bonds right here, where are they? Okay. These bonds are also going to be declared an asset within regards to what you own, okay, for the trust and estate. This is going to be how you're going to fund your life in this regard, moving forward, because these are going to be your securities. All right. Now, one thing that it didn't really talk about as far as estate was about the decedent aspect being dead. So I want to pull that up as
Hey, sorry to
well.
interrupt again, Q. I think somebody else trying to get in.
Is that Fordham Law Review, life insurance and the presumption of death. Now, I've gone over this before, but I'm just going to summarize and pretty much explain how the estate process works, because a lot of people think that probate needs to happen, and probate doesn't necessarily need to happen to declare yourself dead. So what this goes over pretty much is how the presumption of death works, because we're all presumed dead because we have these maritime birth certificates and we're lost at sea, technically speaking. What it means to be lost at sea is to be lost in the commercial world, okay? Lost in the sea of commerce. The reason why we're considered lost at sea is because we haven't been placed on a land record, okay? That's the only difference between being in the water and being on land, is being on the record, okay? So if you've been lost at sea and your birth certificate, technically speaking, or your birth certificate application has never been placed on the land record, then you're dead. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah.
So if it's never been placed on the land record, then you're technically dead.
Yeah. You're
Yeah,
lost
we
in the sea of commerce.
negative presumed, right?
You're presumed dead. Okay.
Mhm.
So what this document goes over is, I'm going to go over a couple quick sentences in it. Life insurance and presumption of death, taking shape in the main from necessity. The familiar presumption of death from an unexplained absence of 7 years is of comparatively recent origin. Not until 1805 did common law accept the doctrine as a fixed rule of evidence with respect to what may be fairly inferred by a jury in the exercise of its logical faculty. Once firmly drawn a blank in whatever the hell. In the law of evidence, however, the presumption soon took the form of a positive element of substantive law requiring that death be assumed under certain circumstances. For obvious reason, in the field of life insurance, the presumption of death is of particular moment. So what they mean is that for people who do or who are in life insurance, the presumption of death isn't good for them because they have to pay out, pretty much, okay? So that's what they mean by that. It is a highly conventional rule of thumb whereby a beneficiary or other claimant of the insurance proceed can circumvent policy provisions with respect to furnishing proof of the death of the insured. See, that's exactly what I just said. And its substantial fairness is unquestionable. Undoubtedly, however, a fertile field for convenient insurance frauds is afforded dishonest policyholders, and the social effects may be conjecturally regarded as no unmixed blessing. Okay. Now, skipping over to suppose, however, that the 7-year period strikes a nice balance between conflicting interests of the claimants and the company is not quite accurate. An impartial observer cannot be but impressed by the gradual relaxation of the rule in favor of one seeking to establish the death of the absentee, particularly when the interests of the claimant of the insurance monies are dependent upon such findings. Undoubtedly, there is justification in the large measure of insurance lawyers' condemnation of the practical workings of the presumption. The precise nature of life insurance, coupled with the necessity for setting aside an adequate reserve for very policy, can scarcely be expected to harmonize favorably with the rule of law, the effect of which is to foster a highly conjectural relationship between the beneficiary and the company. All right, now we're going to go over and explain the 7 years absence. All right. Most provocative of difficulty is the requirement that the 7 years of absence be unexplained. The true test would seem to be that offered by the New York Court of Appeals that evidence must be provided to justify the inference that the death of the absentee is the probable reason why nothing is known about him. Standalone, however, mere proof of unexplained absence will not bring the presumption into play. It must be demonstrated by the claimant that the absence was from the absentee's last known place of residence, unless statutory provisions allow a lesser showing. A diligent and unavailing search for the absentee must be made before the absentee can be declared legally dead. Also required is showing that the absentee has not been heard from by those with whom he most naturally communicate if alive. Having proved these facts, the plaintiff rests, the presumption arises as a matter of law, and the burden of overcoming its force shifts to the issuer. Okay. So what they're talking about here is that if you can prove that you're dead, then the presumption of life would have to then go to, technically speaking, the person who you're making the claim against, which would be the life insurance company. Okay, and technically speaking, the court as well. The insurer's rebuttal may proceed generally along broad lines, seeking always to establish facts inconsistent with the existence of the presumption of death as a logical conclusion. Such evidence usually centers upon an attempt to explain the absence, to probe the motives of the absentee, and to explain to the jury that his departure from his home in contradiction to a disappearance. So what they're trying to explain is this, or what they're trying to say, as far as the standpoint from quote unquote the defendant, they would instead say it's not an absence, they just left. And like, for example, they went to go travel, or like they went to go study or something like that, or they're on a business trip. Okay, so that would be the defenses, or that would be a place where they would come from as to explain why they wouldn't pay out, and the presumption of death would be, for example, rather a departure rather than an absence. And another sentence. In its exposition of the motives behind the absentee's departure, the issuer may bring to light such considerations as the screwish wife or other domestic or marital difficulties, or the fact that criminal prosecution of the absentee was imminent at the time he took his leave. In short, any circumstance which might tend to explain the absence of the continued absence. Of course, the effect of such rebutting evidence may be seriously impaired as a matter of law by statutory provision that the death is conclusively presumed unless proof to the contrary is shown. So even if they sit here and say things like, for example, quote unquote, you were arrested or something like that within the 7-year period that's being claimed, well, that would still have to be proved that that was a lawful or statute or quote unquote how do I say this? They would still have to just prove that the person was still absent regardless, or hold on, let me say this one more time. They would still have to prove that you were absent regardless of whatever charges may be on your record, because charges do not rebut the absence, because that's statutory and that's not a matter of law. That's what I mean. Okay, so does that make sense to everyone?
Yeah, it does.
Yes, it does.
Is Ra in here?
Oh, you mean Ro? What's good with you, bro?
Oh, my bad. Ro, for life insurance, is this making sense for you? Because I know you do life insurance.
Yeah, it's clicking.
It's clicking.
But it makes sense, because that's like, if you submit a death claim, that's the first thing they try to do is investigate, and they give a little pushback. But most people don't know about this presumption of death.
Gotcha, gotcha. All right. Just asking your opinion on it if you've ever seen anything like this. Because what people need to realize is that for you to properly use the estate, you're going to need your death certificate. You can use the estate now if you want to by getting the number and using it for small purposes. But realistically speaking, you can't use the estate for its intended purpose, like for liquidation aspects, until you get your death certificate. And before you get your death certificate, you're going to want to have a life insurance policy in play so that you can fund your life in different means along with your assets, because you're going to be giving a lot of high value consideration because these are high value items that you have. Okay.
Are you talking about the state death certificate or just,
Yeah, the estate death certificate.
okay.
So forward on this. Unfortunately, for judicial equanimity, attempts to fix the time of death within the 7 years next succeeding the disappearance are by no means infrequent. A disappearance shortly thereafter his policy lapse, manifestly, it is to the advantage of the beneficiary suing at the end of the 7 year period to fix the time of the insured's death within the meaning of the policy. Such an attempt being dependent upon a question of fact, the good offices of the jury can usually be enlisted to support such a finding. Under the specific peril rule, attempts to fix the time of death within the period are universally successful when it can be satisfactorily shown that when last seen, the absentee was confronted with some dangerous specific peril calculated presently to destroy his life. And its original form, the rule defined the minimum evidentiary requirements under which a finding of death within a period might be justified, but in most courts, it has lost much, if not all, of its original hardness. So what they're talking about there is like, for example, if you took out a policy today and then you try to claim that you were dead tomorrow, okay, it's going to be a lot more difficult for you to prove that if you just took out the policy, because what they're going to say is that the jury's going to look at it as if pretty much you quote unquote faked your death or tried to explain an absence just so you can reap a benefit. But that's not necessarily the case, is what they're saying, but it's a lot harder to prove now because that's just going to be the presumption. Scrolling on just a little bit more. All right, statute of limitations. But although the insurer is perhaps more justified than the beneficiary in roundly condemning the presumption, it not infrequently impales even the latter on the horns of a dilemma, particularly with reference to the statute of limitations or a provision in the policy that proves that proofs of death must be filed within a certain time after death. Attempting to fix the time of death within the effect limits of a policy now lapsed, the beneficiary is frequently faced with perplexing questions. Shall he proceed with his endeavors in that direction when, if successful, they will fix the time of death at such a time before the consentment of the action as to outlaw his claim? He should proceed by all means, for implied, no doubt, by a desire to assist him in his predicament. Courts have reached some rather surprising conclusion. It is a general accepted rule that the statute of limitation does not begin to run until proofs of death of the insured are available. When his death is established, not by direct knowledge, but by force of the presumption. Okay, so what they're talking about here is that it doesn't really matter if they don't think that you're dead. You have to forcibly prove that you're dead by making sure that you can prove it. So in the beginning, they referenced that if you can prove that the absentee hasn't left their last known domicile. The last known domicile for birth certificates is technically speaking the hospital where it was created or the place where it was created. And that's found at the top right-hand corner of the birth certificate. So give me 1 second so I can actually pull that up for you guys. And here's one. All right, everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So right here. All right, everyone see it now? I know it's still blurry, but can you at least see a little bit better now?
Yeah, that's better.
All right, so what I was trying to show was where it says place of birth, all right? And then it has, I think it says Kaiser Foundation Hospital or something like that. I can't really read it, but Kaiser Foundation Hospital, I think this is Oakland, Almeida, and then it has an address right there. So this is technically speaking where you're born or where you were birthed at, and you've never actually left this address, because anytime you order a copy of your birth certificate, this address remains the same on there. So this is how you prove that the person, quote unquote, that you're talking about when it's reference to the life insurance policy hasn't left, because they haven't. And you can prove that based on the address on the place of birth. Okay. Does that make sense to everyone? This is one way that you prove it as far as when you make your claim to the court. All right.
Mm-hmm. That makes
Does
sense.
anybody have any questions on that?
When you're getting your live birth certificate, I haven't gotten that yet. Do you, is it something that's difficult to obtain? Like, do they make it kind of like the birth certificate where they have the real one archived and you have to do it in such a way for it to be valid?
Mm,
No, it's pretty easy to get.
yeah, it's fairly easy to get. Here, and what I'm gonna put in the chat for everyone, if anyone hasn't already. Vital check.
Just look up your state's vital statistics.
Let's look at the vital statistics office. And
So you said,
here, go ahead. What were you saying?
so you said the address on the birth certificate is the proof that you've never left that place? Like, when
Yes,
you
because
like,
yes. Because
And that's why when you're doing that UCC, right, you put that address for your straw man, right? The the address where the vital statistics is, you put that as your debtor name if you were to do the UCC, right?
yes, because that person, that they've never left that address, and that's not you. Like, for example, like if you got a what is it called, like a letter from court, realistically speaking, that letter is sent to multiple places because you're not the person it's for, you're just the beneficiary. Like Macho, you're a good example. I don't mean to like throw you out there like that. Can I talk about use you as an example really quickly?
How dare you? Yeah, nah, you good, man. I've pretty much made it public, knowing that everybody knows.
All right, thank you, man. Appreciate it. So just as an example, right? Here, I'll share my screen and then I'll talk about your situation ever so slightly, and just to compare what I mean. So here we are. Right. So this sentence right here. Thank you, as I received your correspondence stated reviewing the correspondence. There seems to be a mistake, as although the correspondence was sent to, your name, the judgment was against you or your, who would the register clerk, etc., in his private capacity kindly confirm who you or your is and forward this correspondence to you/your. So what I reference Macho with is, in certain scenarios, they're not always going to use you and your, okay? In his scenario, what they did was they said sirs, and sirs is the plural capacity of sir. So they're addressing more than one person. Now, in the capacity which references the birth certificate, you're just a beneficiary of the birth certificate, okay? You're not actually the owner of it. You're just a beneficial owner, okay? In that aspect, it's like the same thing as the WA Ben, okay? Non-taxable private entity foreign to the United States, okay? So reason why I bring that up is because you need to know that when you're dealing with, how do I say this, your straw man aspect of yourself versus your business aspect of yourself versus your beneficiary aspect of yourself, you need to know the difference in which capacity you're operating in. Are you operating as a trustee executor? Are you operating as your beneficial owner? Are you operating as a business, like, for example, as the owner of the trust or as the owner of the estate, or rather the controller of the trust and the controller of the estate? Okay. Making sense to everyone?
Yes.
yeah.
Okay. So go right ahead. Type your question in the chat. I can't hear you.
So Quasi, my name is Edward. I don't know if it pertains particularly to that. I just had a thought process. I'm operating in a business that deals with credit repair and stuff like that. However, I was trying to figure out how do I process, not necessarily process, but how do I operate as it pertains to not paying taxes, so to speak. If I'm employed by my own company and I'm paying myself, how would that process, how would I move as it pertains to that process? Because I understand the corporations are responsible for taxes. The natural man isn't. But I know there's some forms and things that have to be filled out as it pertains to that.
So you're doing this through an LLC, correct?
Yeah.
Submit as an employee, submit a W-8 BIN to your LLC.
That's a WABIN?
BEN.
BEN.
Yeah.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Bob.
No problem. All right, wait, let me see if that person put their question in the chat really quickly. What should be at the top right-hand corner of the birth certificate? Well, it varies from state to state. All birth certificates are not the same. Some states only have one form, some states have two, some states have three. So it varies from state to state. Like, for example, the one that I pulled up, a lot of people like to say this. It's not necessarily a true thing, but it's true and not true in the context of how you're interpreting it. But this barcode at the bottom, like for example, sometimes this is in the top right hand corner, and then what people say is like, if it's not in the top right hand corner, it's not a bond. Or if they say if it's not in the bottom right hand corner, it's not a bond. Or if they say if you don't have a barcode on there at all, it's not a bond. That's not necessarily true. Every state handles their birth certificates differently, which is why they'll all look different from state to state. Usually you'll know it's a bond because I have a serial number on there, like for example, right there. And for them, they actually included a barcode on it. Some states don't do it like that. They'll just have like a series of numbers at the bottom. Some states won't have any numbers at the bottom. The numbers will actually just be at the top. So it really just depends. Okay, you have to look at your birth certificate and make the determination. It'll have numbers like this, should have a file number somewhere. If you're unsure, I recommend just, sending a copy over to me if you want me to look at it. And I can tell you whether or not those are your bond identification numbers. So moving on. So quick Google search as to what estate banking is. Estate banking. An estate account is a temporary bank account that holds an estate's money. The person you choose to administer your estate will use the account's funds to settle your debts, pay taxes, and distribute assets. So what are you going to be doing with your assets? You're going to be distributing them to your trust. So your trust can do many things aside from just holding your assets as well. For example, your trust can hold the money or all the proceeds from anything that you're doing. So that way, none of your money is in the jurisdiction of the United States. That way, you're still not avoiding, but that way you're still not liable for taxes. That's another purpose of the estate. What they mean by temporary is that you're not going to be working with the estate for forever. This is why you would do subsidiary children business like, a DBA or an LLC, and then you place all this under the jurisdiction of your foreign trust, even if you do S Corp, C Corp, and any of that other stuff too. Now, give me 1 second while I quickly pull up trust banking. I'm going to go into some kind of accounts that you might want to open up. All right, and then we're going to go over DUNS number 2.
Quasi, I have a quick question about the jurisdiction, moving your business over. If I want to
Yes.
move my business under my trust, but I owe taxes on my business, do we have to settle all of that first before we switch it over?
You can settle that as the estate and say that they don't have a claim to it because they don't have the proper paperwork. So I'm actually happy you brought that up. I'm going to actually pause that little Google search that I was doing. And then, well, actually, no. Here's what I'm going to do. Let me just explain this really quickly, and then I'll explain that. All right. So trust banking definition. All right. A trust is a contract that gives an individual or an institution like U.S. Bank, for example, the authority to hold legal title to assets while managing them for the benefit of others. Trust can help you ensure that your assets are distributed and managed according to your wishes. Okay. And that's pretty much the synopsis of what a trust is. You don't try to overcomplicate it. It's just an agreement that allows you to hold assets and benefit for another. Okay. That's the very simplistic way of understanding how a trust operates. Now, understanding what a foreign trust is, it's just in foreign jurisdiction for the benefit of another. Okay. So what I wanted to reference with, for example, if you owe taxes and you're placing this in foreign jurisdiction, where is it? Here we go. This is how you do it. All right. This is going to be one of your best friends. So this is the UCC financing statement. If anybody is unfamiliar with this, okay, get accustomed with it, because this is how you're going to be putting things on land record and how you're going to be conveying assets over. All right. Without having to go to court, probate, and all that other extra stuff. Okay. Check only if applicable, and check only one box. And then it explains collateral is held in trust. See UCC 1AD, item 17 in instructions, or being administered by decedent's personal representative. If you have a power of attorney on file for your, technically speaking, estate, then that's what you'd be using it for. So which one are you going to do? Are you going to hand it to your estate first and then convey it into your trust? Or are you just going to hand everything over to your trust and then have your estate manage those assets? Whichever one you want to do, it's up to you. Okay. But for example, how you can make that determination, if you don't have your estate number yet, or if you do have your estate number yet first and you don't have your trust number yet. So that's how you can make that determination on which one you do first. All right.
Perfect. Thank you.
I have a question. If you don't mind me, if it'll let it. Oh, I was gonna show you, but I don't know if it's letting me. If they suspend it when you're doing this financing statement, and they say here, they say, please retract all personal information that your document has. The information is public and will, once it is recorded, it's made public once it's recorded, and then they return the money order. What, would you take anything off, or would you leave it as you had done so in the video? That makes sense. Hello, can I be heard?
I can hear you, but I think
Yeah,
we
I
might
can
have
hear you.
lost him.
Yeah,
Oh,
Q.
this is really weird. Okay, I'm gonna hit done speaking. I don't know why you did that. Yeah, it must have booted him.
Knowing Q with that.
Yeah, I know, huh? Always on low.
Has anyone successfully done any of these processes? As
What
far as like
process?
doing a UCC one, authenticating the birth certificate, or doing
I've
anything to
authenticated
discharge
the,
the
I've
I
authenticated
got
the
my trust set up, my birth
UCC.
certificate's authenticated. My estate set up. Only thing I haven't done is the UCC.
Yeah, I was just looking at this sheet yesterday too. Glad we're going over it. Yeah, I'm curious to see when he answers that for you, Kat. About them sending
Because
that.
there's another way that you can do it. You don't have to, you can just say the birth certificate, social security number. I've seen it done that way too, where you can just say that party birth certificate, social security number, driver's license, all properties, and there's another way you can do it as well. But
So you
yeah,
did it without listing the numbers.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
No, I said there's another way. I've seen it done. I haven't done mine yet. It's literally, I have it already filled out. I just never submitted it.
Were you able to hear that question, Q?
No, I don't need, it froze on me. I don't even know at what point it froze. Did everyone see where I was explaining the UCC filing?
Well, you're like, we thought you paused, and then I asked the question. So we don't know at what point you were booted, but we saw that you were showing the document.
Oh, damn it. Okay.
Yeah, where it left off, you were about to begin going into the UCC one, and then you froze.
Oh, wow.
And then she said that they sent her all her stuff back saying that she can't be showing personal information because it's going to be on public record.
Well, you're not really supposed to show personal information. Well, did you do a UCC filing or a non-UCC filing?
It was a
Because
non-UCC.
yeah, non-UCC filings, you can't see any personal information. And if you were going to do it, for example, the way I would do it is so that they can't reject it is I do it online first and then I do it on county record. So for example, I'll do it on the New York online website because on the New York online website, if you do it as a non-UCC, nobody can look that non-UCC up.
Okay.
That way nobody can see any of your private or personal information. And then you're just putting it on public record in your state, you know, for their records.
Okay, that makes sense.
No,
Yeah.
it's also
'Cause it's-
done without the public information where it just says this party's birth certificate, driver's license, social security number, and list off all different forms of property. And is that another way you can do it as well?
Yeah, you can do that, but I would always have those documents, you know what I mean? Because you're going to need those assets. Like, for example, when you use them for collateralization or securitization purposes, that's what they're for.
Gotcha.
Okay, so what I was explaining about this was that this is your best friend as far as conveying your property into your estate, not just your agreements like your security agreement or your trust or anything like that. But for example, like it goes over right here, collateral, birth certificate, driver's license, social security number, deed to home, okay? Collateral is held in trust, okay? And the alternative option is being administered by the decedent's personal representative, okay? Meaning if you have a power of attorney on file or if you're the executor for the estate, all right? So you can only check one box. Now, how do you know how you operate? Well, for example, if you only have your trust and you don't have your estate yet, then you're gonna wanna just put the property in trust and then manage the trust assets through the estate. Or if you have your estate and then you don't have your trust yet, then you can just check off that you're doing this through the decedent's personal representative and then manage and then convey those assets into the trust later on once you get the trust number. Okay, so that's how you make that decision if you have one or the other. Because you can only check off one box. All right, 6A, if applicable, check only one box. So we got public finance transaction. I would use that, for example, if I was doing a private transaction and I wanted to make a public record of it. All right, manufactured home transaction. That's pretty self-explanatory. You don't really use those too often unless you're building your own home. You have a contract with somebody like that. And debtor is a transmitting utility. That's just an interface to communicate with other secured parties or creditors in regards to this UCC financing statement. Okay. Now, the real meat and potatoes is right here, just this one little box. 6B, check only if applicable, non-UCC filing. Okay, this is for record and not a financing or an actual lien. Okay, if you don't check this box, what you're doing is a lien. Okay. And if you're leaning on somebody's property, that means that you intend to actually collect payments from them and you're doing some sort of administrative process in reference to suing them. Okay.
This is what you would use to put a lien on yourself.
What do you mean a lien on you? Yeah, if you wanted to put like a commercial lien on yourself, you would use this.
You would do a non-UCC and then a UCC later, or no? Do I have that mixed up?
So you do a non-UCC for the public record because we don't need to do any commercial liens unless we're going through an administrative process for a suit. So like,
Okay.
for example, car dealerships are a perfect example of this. They don't use UCC financing statements, but they put a security agreement inside of their contracts. And the security agreement is very similar to what this is, okay? So what that's saying is pretty much, if you don't do X, Y, and Z, we'll exercise certain rights, okay? That's the same thing as this, but that's not what you're saying. You're just recording that these are your assets. Okay, you're recording the agreement as far as where these things are being placed at. So if they ever try to come after them or try to say anything about them, you have a paper trail of where these assets belong and how they're being held and if they fall outside of a jurisdiction or not. and what you can and cannot do with them. For example, if you have a foreign trust, but they're not held inside of a foreign, like if you did a commercial lien on them and you have assets inside of a foreign trust and then you try to sell those assets, well, then you're going to have to remove the lien to sell them. You get what I'm saying? If you have a non-UCC filing, this is just a recording of it and you don't have to remove this.
Okay. So what's the thing you do every 5 years? Like, is this expired? The non-UCC?
Yeah, this does expire every 5 years. So you have to continue, well, not expire, but you have the option
Renew
to
it.
continue it. Yeah, renew it every 5 years.
Okay. Got it.
So then there's no specific process for like taking certain assets out of a certain jurisdiction. Like if you have a home and you have, let's say, the warranty deed to it and you're putting it on this UCC filing, you're saying that they can't foreclose on the home, or
Yeah, they cannot do any of that stuff. You're recording your ownership of your asset.
So every time your assets update, this is what you update, correct?
Yep. This is what I update. And for example, I'd update this in conjunction with that. Let's say I got a new asset like a car. I may get how do I say this? Get a certified copy of the car, of the title, or make an attested copy. Attach that to, let's say, a UCC addendum, which is just a continuation of the original financing statement, and then just attach it that way. Or you can just list it if you wanted to, and then place it on the public record later on. It's really up to you how you want to do that. But I always say put it on the public record immediately, because if you forget about it and then, you know what I mean, things happen, you know, you don't want to sit here and be like, well, shit, now it's in their jurisdiction and they're trying to move on it. And now I got to, you know, do 10,001 different things to get it outside of their realm of touching it.
Does it have to be clear of all other liens before you could do this?
This isn't a lien.
Gotcha.
Hey, Q.
Oh, yeah, I'm gonna answer your question, but one thing, just so everyone's aware, this UCC1 no longer is a lien once you check box 6B, non-UCC filing. Okay, this is not a lien once you check that box. Non-UCC filing is for record information. Okay, that's all that this is for. And then this gets placed on the land record. And what goes on land records is ownership, titles.
The only reason I asked about that was because on some of these like auto, that you're, you know, when you finance a vehicle, on your title, it shows them as, you know, having a lien on the title.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
so I'm
fine.
wondering if you would still use that title showing them as the lien, if you would still use that just to get it out of the jurisdiction.
Yeah.
In here, or if you would try to then do some tricks to get a title without them showing the lien, or if you don't even have to do that.
I'm confused as to what you're saying. Wait, I'm going to touch on that. Somebody else had a question before that. So let me handle one thing at a time. The person who had a question before Macho, what was going on?
Oh yeah, what's going on, Q? Nah, I was just going back to what you was touching on about the financing statement and the 5-year thing. I was actually reading under the ABC's Article 9, lapse and continuations, where it says in most cases, a financing statement lapses at the end of 5 years. However, if the debtor is a transmitting utility, and in fact is stated on the financing statement, then the financing statement never lapses. It must be expressly terminated.
Yeah.
So just, you know, in reference to, as long as it is checked as a transmitting utility, then I guess it doesn't have to be continued every 5 years.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be continued every 5 years, because in that regard, you would be declaring bankruptcy. That's why they would say that you wouldn't be declaring after 5 years, because you should have done, like, for example, all the paperwork and all the filings, like the 1099 A's, B's, and C's, what else should you have done? As well as the lien paperwork, you should have actually filed some suit against them, and you should have gotten paid as a creditor already. Otherwise, the other person should be filing Chapter 9 or Chapter 11 bankruptcy. So that's why they have it in that regard.
Gotcha.
From what I'm seeing. Okay, now what were you saying, Macho, about the lien and the UCC filing and the car you were referencing?
No, so sorry, I was just, so you're talking about just titles, and this is how we get true ownership. So I'm guessing you're speaking on, true ownership, that title is within that foreign trust. So that's how you get true ownership of the, let's say, property or houses and off of the car, correct? Am I understanding you so far?
Yes and no. So what I mean by that is, like, this is the face cover of everything that you're going to be using. So this goes on top, and then everything else you have goes underneath. Okay, so what I mean by yes and no is, like, yes, this document is what you'd be using, but it's in conjunction with, like, your warranty deed or the title to your car. Like, you're going to be placing an actual physical copy of the document underneath this. You're going to be placing that on public record.
Okay, and you upload that too. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, so like, for example, if you're doing this online, you can only put in the collateral section. That's fine. You can list all your documents. When you print that out, then you can go and get your copies ready and then put that on public record at your actual county office, physically do that there. And for example, if anybody wants to do things this way, some people prefer it like this. So Wisconsin birth certificate, right? They'll have the birth certificate on one financing statement. What they'll do is they'll do that online, print this out, right? Once they have it print out, they'll get their birth certificate, short form and long form, and then they'll staple those together, put that on public record as one, UCC filing, get a certified copy of that, then authenticate that document. Okay, that way with any other agreements that are associated with the birth certificate. And then what they'll do is they'll go to the next document, like the title, you know what I mean? Put that on another UCC and then do things that way, because they want individual certified documents. If you want to do things that way, you can do things that way. It's completely up to you. If not, when you're listing everything, you're going to be placing everything as one packet pretty much, and you're going to be presenting that to be placed on public record altogether. All right. You're going to be using these documents to then establish your claim as far as your position, your assets, what you can convey with banking institutions, as well as courts if need be for anything that you may need to sue for, as far as any, for example, if anybody has any of the beneficiaries' assets, right? Or if anybody needs to pay and they're refusing to pay, all right? That's would be an example of that for. What else? What else? I mean, those are pretty much the basic examples of what you would use that for. If anybody can think of any other ones.
Question, Q. Now, would you use a marriage certificate on there?
Yep, anything that has a number on it, as far as like a serial number or identification number, you throw that on there.
Now, would you do this for your security agreement and power of attorney and all of that to put that on public record?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I have a question.
Wait, I got you. Let me just say this one thing. For people who want to put powers of attorney on public record, a lot of states won't allow you to do that unless you're going through a court case. To bypass that, non-UCC file.
That's a fact. I'm sorry, I asked.
Okay. So go right ahead. What was that question?
Okay, so in the state of Arizona, I'm in the state of Arizona, they give you a very hard time with filing documents on land record that they say is not real estate. They deny it.
Yeah, so to avoid all that, you present them with an already filed one. So this is why, for example, I do mine on, hold on, let me actually pull it up, because it's been a while since I've actually shown this. So, all right, so file a financing statement. Oh, they raised the price? Paper filing, oh no, okay. So here's the online filing. All right, electronic UCC financing statement. You can pretty much do the exact same things that are on here. All right, and it's going to come out looking exactly like this.
Is it
So
possible
go-
for you to look up Washington State? I've been having trouble finding the online filing version, which is why I
Uh,
do see paper.
Just do it through New York. It's fine if you just do it through New
Oh,
York.
for real?
Yeah,
Bet.
you can. Everyone can do this through New York. The whole purpose of doing this, even online, through this section, is because it's the easiest way to just get the financing statement. Once it's already filed, you're just putting it on public record, so they give you less of a hard time because they're not going to want to do the initial filing. That's the problem that they're giving you. This is already filed. You're just putting it on public record at this point.
Right. Thank you for clarifying.
No problem. No problem.
No,
So
I'm
go in.
sure that you can fax too, instead of calling and dealing with them, just fax it, or going up there and dealing with them, just fax it.
Yeah, you could do that as well. If they even have the fax number posted, or you can call them and ask them for their fax number too. That way you don't got to talk to them. And any fees associated, you can fax them the credit card form that they have, and do it that way. So, for example, like we have right here, let's see.
York birth certificate number, colon 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0. Okay. Driver's license.
Now, are you doing this for expired driver's license too, or just active?
Well, doesn't really matter. Well, how do I say this? Either or, and
Because
because
those
like
are
for
matured bonds, right?
yeah, so well, you always carry the same ID number regardless if it's an ID, permit, or driver's license. So if it's expired or not, or let's say your driver's license is expired, but then you got like a state ID, the state ID number is the same as your driver's license number. So I mean, you can classify it into different sections, for example, driver's license, permit, and then ID, but it's going to be the same number, but they fill out different applications. So technically speaking, it's different securities for different purposes. So you may want to include it under different means. But for example, I would get a copy of my expired driver's license and then include that copy on my financing statement.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Or I'd get the copy of my expired permit and then I'd include that on my financing statement or my expired ID card or anything that's expired, really.
Right. Okay. Perfect. Thank you for that.
No problem. So you list all of those on there. All right. And then here's that section that is on the other financing statement. This one right here, the alternative section, check the boxes. So 6, leaseor, leasee, consignee, consignor, Bailey, bailor, seller, buyer. Okay. Do this one, check only if applicable. Debtor is a trust. Okay. Or debtor is a trustee acting with respect to property held in trust. Decedent to state. Okay. I like this one more because it actually like spells it out a lot better. Okay. And then number 8, check only if applicable, transmitting utility, manufactured home, public finance, agricultural lien, or non-UCC filing. So I would, in this case, I would only check off non-UCC filing. Okay. One of these two, depending on which one I was doing, either decedent or trust, usually I do trust. But these are the ones that normally you'd be checking off: Bailey, bailor, trustee acting in respect to property held in trust, and then non-UCC filing. And then any optional reference data if you want, or you can just put an X and then an underscore line, and then another X and then another underscore line, and then you can do it that way. Really just depending on you. Okay, does that make sense as far as that goes and how you're doing that UCC statement to convey your property for the purposes of banking?
Yep.
What does that
Because
X and dash mean?
that's where you would sign.
Copy.
So if you want, like, for example, you can make this UCC a signature, or you can put some codified information on there if you wanted to. Just depends on how you want to do it. So it's really up to you. So if you want to do the X and sign, you can. If you don't, you want to put codes there, you can. If you want to put some codes and you want to like make enough space so you can sign too, go right ahead. Okay.
Now, would it be necessary for us to, in say the collateral section, put transmitting utility as you instructed before in one of your other videos, just for the simple fact you can't select both that and the non-UCC filing?
Yeah, so yep, that's actually what I showed in an example well, not a long time ago, but a couple months ago. You can write that in the collateral section if need be.
Okay.
So is that making sense for everyone? Oops. And
Yes, sir.
then you'd actually be attaching a real copy of your birth certificate, which is why I would say order multiple copies. Okay, so you don't have to worry about just having one and being like, okay, well, I sent my only copy off. What do I do now? Order multiple copies. Okay. So now that I went over this, let's talk about trust accounts a little bit more. Talk about this. I'm gonna talk about DUNS number, and I'm gonna talk a little bit about liquidation next. Okay.
So I have a quick question. So if for the UCC, so since the non-UCC is for public record, the actual UCC financing statement itself is for private record. If we don't check, okay, so if we don't check non-CC, it actually is a lien, correct?
Yes.
That makes
Yeah, so it's either a public record or it's a lien. Those are the two options. Okay. And really speaking, we only need to be doing public records.
I got a quick question about that UCC as well.
Go right ahead.
All right, so I had did mine with Maryland, and I actually like they gave me the file number and all that stuff. I don't really know how to check to see if it's like for public view or not, but I want to say like a week later, I had got my federal authenticated birth certificate back. Should I amend it to put that file that's on the front of that authentication, or should I just keep the file number from the birth certificate?
Yep, you would amend it and place that file number on. So see, sometimes people like to wait until they have all their documents in line so that they don't have to do multiple filings, but it's okay if you need to, okay? Not really that big of a deal. It's just like, for example, how do I say this? I wouldn't just want to do like 10 addendums, you know what I mean? I'd like to gather at least, at least an abundance of the assets that I have, so I wouldn't have to do something like that and then continuously go back and place things on public record. But later on, you may need to, because you may be selling assets and things like that. So you need to take some assets off your off of your financing statement. So
okay, cool. Yep.
Any other questions?
Yeah, so actually to remove an asset off of your statement is kind of the same process, or is there something that you need to state that you're removing this asset off of your statement now?
Yeah. So hold on, actually, give me 1 second. Let me pull that up. That was actually a really good question. If anyone didn't hear what he asked, pretty much if you would use a UCC3 to delete something, if you sold it or did anything with it and it was no longer in your possession, right here, right? We're on section 8, collateral change. So it's either deleted, added, restated, or signed. You click deleted, and then you would describe which collateral was deleted, okay? Or if you add something, this is how you're going to do that. If you're stating it because, for example, you're changing the name or you're adding the name of somebody else on this, and then you're just restating the collateral, that's what that's for. And if you're assigning the collateral to somebody, this is what you're going to be clicking right here. All right. And then you're going to describe the collateral that was assigned to them. All right. So what somebody would use this for actually is, how do I say this? Let's say you were going to use your assets for securitization and investment purposes, right? You may want to assign it to a broker so that they have the ability to do whatever they need to do with the collateral. Okay. They may have their own forms to do this, but you're going to have to do this for your own records purposes. So that's why this would be done as well. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
Okay. Irrevocable trust accounts, 12 CFR section 330.13. Definition: irrevocable trust accounts are deposit accounts held by an irrevocable trust established by a statute or written trust agreement. An irrevocable trust may also be created through the death of a grantor of a revocable living trust. Okay. So for people who do have revocable trust because they already established trust, it's okay, because once the estate comes into play and the grantor dies, then it becomes an irrevocable trust. So in that aspect, you're all good. It's just for certain reasons, you may not want to have to go through all those extra steps. All right. Make your life easy. Creators of irrevocable trust are commonly called grantors. A grantor of an irrevocable trust creates the trust and contributes funds and property to the trust. However, the grantor cannot amend or revoke the trust agreement. Only the beneficiary can. To be insured in this category, the account should be titled in the name of the trust. The identities and interests of the beneficiaries should be ascertainable from the trust agreement, although the trust may be valid under state law. So what they're saying is, in your security agreement or whatever agreements you have, if you don't have a security agreement, there's other types of ways to convey property. But if you have one of those, make sure that the beneficiary is clearly identifiable, okay, within the trust agreement, either by a conspicuous statement identifying the beneficiary. Like for example, the one that I have for the security agreement identifies the beneficiary in the color red, okay, on the very first page. So there's pretty much no way that you can say that you don't know who the beneficiary, or rather the secured party is. All right. So this talks about the insurance limits because of FDIC insurance, 250,000. Okay, living grantor establishes a revocable trust. So this is for the people who have living trust, or living trust, or what's it called, living wills. All right, in determination of coverage for irrevocable trust, IDI employees should consider the following questions. An irrevocable trust, the grantor transfers property to the trust, and once those assets are transferred, they are beyond the grantor's reach. However, grantors at times retain an interest in some or all of the trust assets. When a trust provides for the trustee to be able to return assets to the grantor, those assets are the grantor's retained interest. John, for example, funded his irrevocable trust with a $250,000 deposit. Under the terms of the trust, John may recover the funds under certain prescribed circumstances. In this example, the entire $250,000 is considered a retained interest. To the extent that the grantor has a retained interest in an irrevocable trust, the retained interest is considered the grantor's single account added to the grantor's other single accounts at the same IDI, and the combination balance is insured up to $250,000. So that was a perfect example as to why, for one, things are done in a foreign jurisdiction without a grantor, because what they explained is something that a state could do. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So retained interest in property that you're conveying into your trust is the example that I'm using. So John would be the state in that aspect. So under certain circumstances, they could recover proceeds from you depositing or you putting your assets in the trust. And that's what you don't want. This is the reason why, even in the aspect, if you have it set up where you did a grantor trust, you're going to want to get that estate, because when you start conveying this property over, you don't want retained interest from the state, because they will try to come after your property. And you don't want them to, because it's all outside of the jurisdiction. And the only way that the trust can be changed is by the beneficiary if there's no grantor, if you already have a revocable trust. All right. So unless the grantor dies, it's like you're kind of just sitting around waiting for potentially somebody to take your stuff. And that's why I just don't like revocable trust that much. All right. So if anybody wants to read this, I'll actually just post this in the group. Does anybody have any questions on irrevocable trusts as far as how it works, or what's the difference between irrevocable and revocable? What protections irrevocable has that revocable doesn't? What are the positions in a trust? If anybody has any questions on that, how does this work in conjunction with the estate, or just anything along those lines? Any questions?
How did you layer your trust? Do you have a church on the top of your trust, like your ladder?
Nope.
Like a church organization, or do you just have one single trust?
One single trust.
Okay, so one foreign situs and then the estate.
One foreign situs in the estate, and then I have a couple DBAs underneath that, and
Under the estate?
yeah, and a sole proprietorship and the C corp.
Fire. And you just went ahead and transferred them over to the estate.
You do this the easiest way that I did this, and this was, my method. If anybody has a different method, you are more than welcome to do so. But I mean, actually, I had to do this on a fucking amendment. How am I doing? So I just, for example, and that's it.
Ooh. So basically with that, you're building up your paydex score with your estate. So you can get funding with that.
Well, I try not to use the estate for too much, only when it's necessary. And that's when I use the estate is when I'm dipping into the trust or something like that. Or for example, if I needed to use that for credit purposes for like a DBA or something like that, or one of the other corporations I have, or not corporations, but businesses I have.
Gotcha.
Okay. So that's just how you convey a business under, a trust outside their jurisdiction. That's just the simplest method that I have. If anybody has anything a lot simpler, feel free to, speak on it. And, in conjunction with this, like, for example, if I had like a business agreement or a business arrangement or any business paperwork that was already filed or anything like that, I type that all in here, like, business.
So then essentially, if you start a new corporation or anything, you could just set the responsible party as the estate or the trust.
This is like the same thing as having a registered agent.
Right.
Okay, so I just went to go start. I just started another business today and went to go open that business account. So that the corporation, the governors on that corporation, I could add on this the statement now, right? Okay.
Business agreement number. Any account numbers, like let's say like Quasimodo Estate EIN business agreement, then we have estate. Account number Wells Fargo. And then, we throw in that account number, 1, 2, and you know what I mean? And then, for example, you would do that for every single one. So if you had an estate, S Corp, C Corp, LLC, DBA, sole proprietorship, you would put all that in there, and any agreements that you had or any contracts that you had between yourself and the business or whatever relationship you have, you put all that stuff in here. And then I put all that on the record. Because there needs to be a paper trail of this if you're going to say that you own any of this, or if any of this stuff is yours, and this paperwork is going to be your protection. So is that making sense for everybody? How you would convey your businesses underneath your trusts?
Yes. So when you haven't gone and like got a whole business license for your LLC and such with the state, and you're just creating it from foundations, you would just put in a business agreement in there and then create an EIN for a corp or LLC. Does that make sense?
Rephrase that one more time. I don't think
Well, I'm trying to understand because normally how we know it, we would go, you say we had a barbershop and we were starting a business, and we'd go get a license and tell the state and all that stuff. But in this case, we would just put it on the record and create an agreement, right? And then get this this form here for the non-UCC and put in your agreement number.
No, so for example, you get the EIN for the corporation or whatever you're starting. So for example, if you were starting a barbershop, go get the LLC. Or for example, you don't have to get a business license. You can do a trust and then do it as a DBA if you really wanted to.
Okay,
You know
that's
what
what I
I'm
was
saying?
thinking.
Yeah, so it really just depends on how you want to do your businesses. Because some people prefer LLC, some people prefer sole proprietorships. I'm not necessarily going to tell you how to do your banking because you may have a preference as to why you do your banking that way. But there's options out there, you know what I mean? And realistically speaking, it doesn't really matter if you have an LLC, S Corp, C Corp, sole proprietorship, as long as that business is outside of their jurisdiction as far as the registered agent and a corporation goes.
Okay, got it. Turning off my mic.
Okay. So any other questions on this specifically about conveying your businesses into your trust or at least into the foreign jurisdiction? So, you know, the US ain't touching it. And this goes for like any proceeds or anything that you're doing, as well as employees too. You can place employees under the foreign jurisdiction as well. Like, I forgot who said it, but someone who has themselves employed by themselves as that for the LLC. You can put yourself in foreign jurisdiction, and then in that case, you would actually be using the W-8 form a lot. I wouldn't say it better, but it would actually make more sense because you're already foreign in that regard. So why not?
Is that why a lot of police can get away with a lot of shit? Like
What you mean?
undercover? Like when they do that shit, is it because they're like in different jurisdictions?
Yeah. I mean, just for example, cops aren't really cops, they're municipal officers and they're working for the organization or the incorporated version of the state. So like the state has its sovereignty, and the only way the state can do business is through cities, technically speaking. So that's why they do it as such. They're in a different jurisdiction. And like if you try to sue a cop, then they go right to that state jurisdiction, and it's like, oh, you can't sue them. That's with that qualified immunity.
That makes sense.
I got it.
So they employ cops through the municipal, and then when they get in trouble, they give them qualified immunity because they'll say that they're under the state. So it's like, all right, well, I'm doing business for the corporation, but now I'm in my private sovereign capacity, you know, in reference to suits. And the reason why it works that way is because we just went over what an estate is, and it just said an estate can't be sued or sue.
So would that be
That's why you do
the
your
same thing by having like your security, like you can have like a gun trust and security trust, and you working up under those, but you're still like a part of those? Does that make any sense?
You said a gun trust and a what trust?
Like a gun trust and like a security trust. So like even like correct me if I'm wrong. Only people that's felons aren't allowed to have like firearms when you're going by their codes and statutes. But if you have like a security trust or a gun trust, and you are a trustee and your firearms, everything else belong to that trust, and technically you still can kind of wiggle past all that stuff, correct?
Yes, you're absolutely right on that. See, that is actually an alternative to using the passport card as the means to invoke your Second Amendment right. So you were most definitely allowed to do that, yes.
And then one of the issues that I've had was I went to like different gun stores, and I asked questions in a way to where it's like I want to raise an alarm because I want to get a response that I'm looking for. And I say, yo, have anyone ever purchased firearms through a trust? And half of the people that's there, a lot of people don't even know what the hell a trust is. At least the people that's behind the counter, but the people who probably own the stores actually do. So they was like, well, not that I know of, but like I said, I'm about 80-90% sure that you can actually purchase them that way because they're technically their own legal persons, correct?
Well, yes, and how do I say? Give me 1 second. Let me actually pull it up. You can actually include this in your own irrevocable trust agreement now. Well, not irrevocable. If anybody has a revocable one, you can put it in there now. But if you don't, then the only way you're changing this agreement is if you are the beneficiary and already have the estate set up. And let's say, as a beneficiary, you wanted to establish a trust agreement for a gun inside of the already established trust agreement, then you are allowed to do that. So trust for guns. Gun trust is a generic name for revocable, irrevocable management trust that is created to take title to firearms. Revocable trusts are more common as they can be amended and changed during the lifetime of the grantor. Okay, so yes, you are allowed to do that. And realistically speaking, one of the ways that you'd be doing that, I would be speaking directly with registered agents to the owners of gun shops, because that's not something that would be handled commonly.
I know,
Or
but when you get to
you,
more like higher end things and like
Mhm.
higher power shit like machine guns and shit of that nature, the people that higher up people actually know more about those than like basic firearms and things of that nature. When you come like what's they class 3 firearms and things of that nature,
Mhm.
like a lot of those people who've been in the actual gun world know more about those than like the newbies and stuff of that nature.
Of course, of course. I mean, I don't expect any of the agents over the counter to be able to know any of the information that you're trying to raise alarms about, and very few and far between in that. So it's like if you are able to catch one, I feel like you're really lucky in that regard, because they actually may know how to process the transaction without you having to jump through hoops, trying to figure out, what special forms do you have for this purpose, because we wouldn't need a traditional license like another person would. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Um, yeah, then another easier way that a lot of us know how to acquire them is to just buy a bunch through private sale and then just use that like what they call a bill of sale. And then you have the bill of sale to show that you actually got it from somewhere, and then just drop it over into your trust or whatever you want to put it.
This is when you would use this right here. You add that, you put the bill of sale number on there, you list the property, you can describe it if you want to, or you can be very simplistic. It doesn't really matter. And you don't have to attach a copy of the gun, clearly, or not the gun, but the arm. But just listing that and attaching the bill of sale works perfectly fine. Okay.
Okay.
The arm usually will have
The
a
serial
number,
number.
the
Yeah.
serial number on it, which you can use because that is what they use to actually put on your license to carry. They put the serial numbers of the guns that you are supposedly allowed to have on your person. They put it in the back of your card. Now, my only question with that, Q, is now what, because this is what happened to me on the second occurrences recently with the officers where they almost shot me in my face, was because I had my pistol that I was licensed to carry with me in the vehicle. So now, how do you, when you come across that, me being a licensed to carry individual, almost getting shot. Now imagine you not having that license physically to carry. How are they to explain, or how do you go about showing that this is not in their jurisdiction? Like how would you go handle that situation? Let's say one of us with the gun trust now have to explain or figure out how to get that.
Well, one aspect of doing that is already being in trust from the beginning. So, for example, your car is already in trust. That's already keeping you outside their jurisdiction, right? So when they start asking questions like, okay, well, let me see, license, registration, title, whatever other jargon, you present them with the information that you have. You know what I mean? And you politely let them know, listen, I operate as a trust. And that's all the information that I can really give you, because operating as a trust, there's no particular, like, how do I say this? It's completely different from operating as a person or as an individual, because the identification for a trust is not the same identification for an individual. Like, a trust doesn't have a state ID card. You know what I mean? A trust doesn't have a driver's license. So when you're presenting them with the information, you're going to have to be presenting it in a very specific way. Let me pull up an example so I can show you exactly what I mean from my own states. Connecticut Law Enforcement Officers Field Manual, Red Book and Blue Book. All right. So this is how the penal code, the penal code works in my state, and every state reflects pretty much the exact same thing in its own way. But for the purpose of, like, for example, they were doing a traffic stop, what they would try to do is define me as a person under here, human being, and where appropriate, a public or private corporation, an unincorporated association, a partnership, a government or government instrumentality. It's Connecticut General Statute Section 53A-3 subsection 1. All right, and those are the violations for penal codes for motor vehicles. Okay. If you look over here, person, a natural person, corporation, limited liability, company, trust. partnership, incorporated or unincorporated, association, or any other legal governmental entity, including any state or municipal entity or public official. And you see how there's no penal code associated with this? Well, that's what you would actually need to reference. Okay, this is something that you should actually have in your car, for your
What
own
document
state.
is that?
This is my state's law book, or my state's law enforcement field manual. Every state should have their own that you can buy online. And this defines pretty much everything that they would use to try to like pin anything on you. And this is something that I keep in the, the private conveyance, because anytime, you never know what can happen. Anybody could try to violate your rights and the law. So it'd be best to inform them to the best of your ability with their own information. You know what I mean? Because I can't say that an officer may know every single page that's in this book. And if they did, then they should be aware of the particular capacities a person can operate in. But if they aren't, these words are specifically highlighted for such purposes. So that's how I would deal with that situation. Now, if they want to sit here and try to disregard this, fine. I'm cool with going to court. I like lawsuits. But, an exercise of your right really shouldn't come with fear if you can inform calmly. And they're going to do what they're going to do. But realistically speaking, it's like you have one or two options. Either, let them do what they're going to do because they're already escalated, like in your situation, Nacho, to a point where your life is in danger, and, let them do what they're going to do so you don't lose your life. You know what I mean? And get them on the back end later on, because that's what's supposed to be done. But,
Yeah, it's
so-
crazy when they got their barrel of their pistol in your nose and their hand is shaking more than you are, and you're the one that's got the gun pointed at you. It's fucking crazy.
So, and hold on. Look, for example, possess, to have any physical possession or to exercise dominion or control over tangible property. And you see how it says 53A subsection 3 dash 3 subsection 2. Well, the hell did we just look at? This is the definition right after person, so they can possess you. Okay, which is why the reason why they can do that is because you fall under the definition of person that falls under that Connecticut General Statute, which is a penal code. Okay, which references only this type of person. So anytime that they're referencing, for example, any penal code in the state, you need to see in what regards they're referencing it. Like, for example, if I got a motor vehicle charge, right, and then they were charging this motor vehicle charge using this penal code right here, well, my rebut would be, I'm actually defined under this.
Because it's in the trust.
Yes. Just a rebutted presumption. That's really it. Because you can presume anything. And if you, like, for example, if they can't read the paperwork, you know what I mean? Because they don't have the capacity to. A lot of what I found out was a lot of officers have a certain level of IQ because pretty much they just don't want officers talking back or being able to make determinations on whether or not the orders are lawful. You know what I mean? They just want people who do what are told. So in that regard, it's like if you present them with some paperwork that they're unfamiliar with, it's just like, okay, I don't know what to do with this. I don't know how to read it, so I'm just going to get angrier. It's like there's no way to, how do I say, defeat ignorance altogether in like one false swoop. But it's like you can do your best to inform, even if they're going to be willfully ignorant. This is why you call for supervisors, and you have your information in the car because this information is going to be pertinent to everything you're doing later on. And having it on public record, because if they take it or destroy it or anything, guess what? You can go back to the public record and get a copy. So nobody can say that you don't have what you need. Okay? Makes sense?
That's fire. Thank you, Q.
No problem. All right, so I'm going to go over DUNS numbers for the last portion of this. All right, so actually, hold on. Let's look up what a DUNS number is first to explain this. The DUNS number is a unique 9-digit identifier for businesses. This number is assigned once our patented identifying identity resolution process, part of our Dunn's Right methodology, identifies a company as being unique from any other in Dun & Bradstreet's data cloud. The Dunn's number is used as a starting point for any company's live business identity. The most comprehensive and continual update view of any company's data cloud. Dunn's numbers are often referenced by lenders or potential business partners to help predict the reliability and or financial stability of a company in question. Dunn's, which stands for Data Universal Numbering System, is used to maintain up-to-date and timely information on more than hundreds of million global businesses. The Dunn's number also enables identification of relationships between corporate entities, hierarchies, and linkages, and other key elements of live business identity and commercial risk assessment practices. Why do I need a Dunn's number? The Dunn's number is used around the world to identify and access information on businesses. A Dunn's number identifies a company's Dun & Bradstreet's business credit file, which may include firmographic data, company name, address, phone number, etc., corporate family relationship, headquarters, branches, subsidiaries, etc., which I was referring to as far as knowing the trust estate and then all the subsidiaries like as such, and scores and ratings that assess different financial health indicators. Taken all together, this profile of information is called Dun & Bradstreet's live business identity. Potential partners and lenders can request a business credit report about your business using your Dunn's number or other business identifiers. Equally, you can use a Dunn's number to access the same information about any company with which you might wish to work. Because it is a universal recognition and unique assignment, the Dunn's number can also serve as a primary data point within an organization's master data management architecture. In this manner, the Dunn's number and the connected live business identity data enables a single source of truth in the capture and storage of information related to a company's customer, partner, and supplier. Okay, so that's what a Dunn's number is. It's pretty much the business aspect of credit. Okay, so how do you get one?
Okay. Oops. No. That's on here. Come on. There we go.
So get a Dun & Bradstreet number. All right, primary reason for Dunn's number registration. I have a US-based business, okay? Now, it's okay to say this, and the reason why I say that is because you cannot get a Dun, well, not that you cannot, let me rephrase that. It doesn't make any sense to try to get a Dunn's number for your trust. Now, you can if you want to. I'm not saying don't, but if you were going to do that, then you need to go to the foreign Dun & Bradstreet website, because your trust is foreign and Dunn's numbers in this sense are for domestic businesses, which is why it says these are the options that you have. I have a US-based business, a Canada-based business, I'm an Apple developer, a US government contractor or grantee, or I need a UFI to register with the FDA. Okay, and that's not really applying to you. You have a US-based business. The US-based business would be your LLC, sole proprietor, S Corp, C Corp, DBA, or your estate would be considered something that you can use this for, okay? So your legal business name, it's just saying, Quasimodo Estate. All right, I know this won't bring me very far because this is none of the proper information, but I'm just showing people how this would look. All right. Oh my goodness, I cannot believe they actually pulled up a fucking company with this information. Damn it. Okay. Does anybody have a US-based business that they would like to use for an example for this purpose?
Sure, I do. As Invert Consulting.
Spell that for me.
INVERT. Consulting.
Inc. or anything like that?
LLC.
So I'm gonna search. Wait, what the hell? You actually have one. They already set one up for you.
Yeah. Oh shit.
Yeah. So
Okay.
if you want away, yeah, you already have one.
Well, change the business name to U.S. Records and see if maybe they haven't gave that one because I have the same address for another business.
Like this?
Yes.
All right, LLC or no?
I think yeah, it should be LLC.
All right. You see it?
Yeah, I actually see a few of my businesses on there. Oh my god.
Yeah, so you already have it done in Bradstreet. You know, it's already done for you.
Okay.
Yeah. So it shows you as active and everything. So if you already have this set up, for example, like your LLC, more than likely you already have your DUNS number. And I believe Kate is the one who referenced this. It doesn't cost thousands of dollars to do this. This is a free thing. Okay. So if anybody is doing that, this is literally all they're doing is just going to this website and then doing this. Okay. And it's not a very hard process. And you can get this profile on yourself and then you can use that for your business purposes as far as showing your credit history. And then this is how you can do your banking as far as borrowing against your assets, for example. Okay. Once you place like one of these LLCs into your foreign trust, the foreign trust has, or your LLC has the same assets as your foreign trust does. So if you wanted to use, for example, your business credit and then take an asset from your trust, use that for collateral purposes, and then do whatever with it, you know what I mean? Like start another business or who knows what, expand your business, go right ahead. That's what this is for.
Mind blown.
Okay. So does anybody else have a business that they want to look up to see if their DUNS number has already been established? Because if you weren't aware, you already started your business credit, venture, and you may not have even been aware.
Quasi, I do have a question. This is Jennifer again.
What's going
I
on?
have a DUNS number, but do we want to get one? I have it for my LLC, but do we want to have one for our estate, our LLC, our sole proprietors, like everything, or can I use this DUNS number for everything basically regarding my trust?
You can use that for basically everything regarding, you can just use the estate and the estate. I mean, what the hell am I saying? You can use the LLC because the LLC should be under your trust.
It will be under my trust. Okay, perfect.
Yes. So you can do business with all that. You don't have to have multiple DUNS numbers if you don't want to. People can if they need see the need to, but there's really no reason to if you don't have to.
Okay, great. Perfect.
Yeah, you can just use one business's credit for the purpose of the whole business,
And everything can just be under the LLC.
Or if you want, you can get multiple businesses and start establishing multiple lines of credit. But some people just don't have the time for that. Now, if you're into like really big entrepreneurship, that may be something that you may want to get involved in.
I'm gonna find the time.
Yeah, exactly. So there's no problem with that.
Thank you.
No problem. Is anybody else unaware if they have a DUNS number already assigned to them and they want to do a quick check to see if they do?
I'll do one, Quasi.
All right, what's going on? Legal business name?
Confucius Say LLC. So with a K.
Yeah.
Yep, you got a DUNS number.
Oh, great.
Yeah, you've already been establishing business credit. So you can actually get your report, see what's on it. And like, for example, anybody who does anything with consumer law, this is the exact same thing.
Thanks, Quasi.
No problem. And then if this, like, for example, if your company or your business wasn't on here, you'd be clicking get a new DUNS number. And then where people say cost, small business, all that other stuff, the option right here for free. Okay, does everybody see that?
Yeah,
Yep.
it's free, and they're gonna try to call you after you sign up. They're gonna try to call you and sell you like a $3,000 package to help you with all your credit and all that shit. And they're gonna call you like 10 times, tell them you don't need it, and stop calling you. And if you know consumer laws, screenshot every time they call you, and then hit them for
Boom.
$1,000 per call.
And it says right here, register for your company for a free DUNS number and begins the process for building your business credit. This process can take up to 30 business days. We will email you when your DUNS number has been created. Okay. If you
I
are
will add
US,
something
go right
um,
ahead.
as far as the DUNS number goes as well. Like Macho was saying, they'll call you and try to sell you a package. But I did have an appointment with a gentleman that was giving me a lot of information about the DUNS. And one of their smallest packages, I think, I don't know if it's $700 or whatever it is. It might be worth it for some people that are really trying to build their score really fast, because he did tell me that everything you've ever purchased, whether you used your business account, if you even had a business account or not, anything you've ever purchased, if you can, like, say you bought stuff on Amazon, if you give them the receipt number and the Amazon corporate office, they'll put that on your business credit as a paid like trade. So if
Oh
you can
yeah,
have like
yeah, yeah. Oh, I'm so
Wow.
happy you mentioned that. I'm
right,
so
so
happy
he
you
said
mentioned
you can
that.
have so many things that you purchase throughout the year. It could be anything. And
Yeah.
he said if you give them the corporate number, they'll verify that it was a real receipt and they'll add it as a paid trade.
Okay, so I'm happy you referenced that, because there was another point to that. I don't know if I spoke about this on class or on a console, but I was speaking about the adjudication of receipts and about how, I don't know if people even seen this Patrick Devine video. He talks about it too, about how if you go dumpster diving in Walmart, you can technically be a millionaire if you adjudicate those receipts as far as taxes go for business purposes. So what that means is that you're claiming all that, for example, for trade exchanges, for tax write-offs, for abandoned property purposes, etc. So that example that you gave with that is a really good example, because let's say it wasn't necessarily your receipt, you can actually do a 1099-A for an abandoned asset and then claim it as yours. And then do that exact same process. And then you can actually put way more trade exchanges. Let's say you don't do a lot of purchases like that. You know what I mean? You can raise your score a lot higher that way if you know how to do things like that.
Wow. I'm still learning the 1099 A's, and that's a whole nother thing I'm gonna have to learn. I have no idea how to do the A's, B's, or C's.
You know, I'm going to quickly touch on that as the last thing. I know I explained to
Thank you.
everybody. Stay away from the 1099s as far as doing that to discharge debt. I would use 1099s for tax purposes, though, as far as writing things off or claiming things. Okay. Now, explaining a little bit how 1099As work and what capacity I would use them in. I'm going to stick with the receipt example. Okay, because I like that one. Let's say I spent $1,000 a month on Amazon, right? Actually, no, let's say this. I found $1,000 worth of receipts on the floor for Amazon, right? And it has all the information as far as like who it was sent to, the last four of like the card numbers, you know, all that good stuff, right? What I would do is I would take that receipt, because that receipt is technically an abandoned asset, and I'd claim it on a 1099-A. I would then do a 1099-B on it to barter with it, depending on how I'm handling the transaction, either with the IRS or with another company or with a bank, depending on, again, what capacity I'm operating in, to see if I can deposit that with them in exchange for credits. Now, if I can or can't, that would determine whether or not I'd go into a 1099-C or OID with them. But that would be like an example of a purpose I would use a 1099-A for the adjudication of a receipt. And then I would also have either a 2848 or a Form 56, so I can actually use those forms, because I wouldn't be using that without it.
Okay. And the
Good question.
1099, what did you say the 1099-C was?
Cancellation of debt. 1099-A is the abandoned property, and 1099-B is barter.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. Mantra, you had a question?
Yes. So now, for these receipts, you would just need a picture at least of the receipt, right? Or do you need the actual physical receipt?
You need the actual physical receipt.
How does that work?
What do you mean? Like, if like I bought something from the store with my debit card, they give me a receipt?
Yeah, like let's say, all right, bet. So I take a picture of all my receipts. Let's say I have like 100K in receipts for businesses over the past 2 years. I would need to find the physical receipt still, or would I be able to look at my information in my picture?
You can use the information in your picture to write down the numbers, yeah, but you should have the receipts as far as referencing. Because what if they ask for the copies of them? Because the people in taxes like to verify this information. So if you're putting some numbers on there for like write-off purposes or for like acquiring abandoned property, they may ask, okay, well, do you physically have them, like the receipts? And then if so, can you send them to such and such address?
Yeah, because we were talking about this in your group, and we were talking about how they started using ink that wears away really fast on your receipt now. So even if you keep the physical receipts, by the time they may ask you to turn them in, they're just gonna be a blank piece of paper.
Right.
So this is why people do taxes quarterly.
Mm-hmm.
You can do taxes whenever you want if people weren't aware of that too. They don't have to be done at the end of the year.
Yeah, usually businesses do them quarterly and all that. And the only reason I asked about that as well is because in your group there was talks about how you could there's apps that'll pay you for taking the pictures of your receipts, and I just kind of warned people to kind of stay away from it because I didn't know if they were then that company that's giving you a penny per receipt is gonna go claim that abandoned.
That's what they're doing. They're giving
exactly.
You
So, see, I wasn't wrong.
Wow.
I'm telling everybody, yo, stop using that. They're gonna come claim your receipts. You getting a penny for your $100 receipt, $200 receipt. They cashing that shit abandoned property with the IRS and giving you a penny.
Wow, the disrespect.
Exactly.
It's just because you don't know. And it's not
smart.
disrespect. You're the naive person. You know what I'm
It's
saying?
smart.
You getting your penny. That you happy that you getting your penny for something that you normally throwing away.
No,
They
you're
just
right.
know-
It's disrespectful because it's predatory. But I
For
hear
sure,
you.
yeah. Everything is.
Yeah.
Can we put multiple receipts for one 1099, or is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You wouldn't
add
do a
all up?
1099 for every single receipt. Do you know how crazy that would be?
It does, but things are crazy. So I said, let me just ask just to make sure.
That would
You
be
know
wild.
I get you.
Gotta
That
go
would be
99
fucking
for a
wild.
$7 receipt.
Right.
Be busy if you doing that though.
No. So the easiest way to do something like that is like I was explaining, like quarterly. Let's say you get, let's say $10,000 worth of receipts. Put that on a 1099-A and then do it that way. You know what I mean?
Perfect.
And then if they ask for, the receipts or for the information where you're getting that from is when you send that over to the address where they're requesting it. There you go. And then they adjudicate the receipts on there and you don't have to worry about it. You just keep it for your records. If they're asking to see your records, you give it to them. Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to exchange your records or quote unquote warehouse receipts for something else, which would be credits, what's due on them. Because more often than not, with how the warehouse receipts work is that their debits and credits need to be issued from those debits. Or if they're credits, debits need to be issued from those credits.
Now, I don't want to get off subject. I don't know if you don't know, but is there a statute of limitations for your receipts if you plan on doing, quarterly or bi-quarterly?
As long as no one's claimed them, right? They're abandoned property. Nobody's claiming them.
Abandoned property goes for 3 years to 30 years.
Wow.
So, you can go back 30 years. If you have a receipt from 30 years ago, which is highly unlikely for anyone, because the ink probably would have worn away. But let's just say someone did. Interest on a warehouse receipt, you may want to start trying to figure out what that is because, the longer that it stays and nobody's technically claimed it, that's interest.
Right.
What if somebody else tries to claim a receipt that you have? Like, how would you know? Would they tell you this receipt has already been claimed?
Yeah, they actually would. But this is why you're doing the 1099 because it's abandoned property because nobody's claimed it.
Okay.
Because, like, for example, you're beating them to the punch. Like, if, and this is how you need to start calculating and looking at the dates, because this is how you're going to determine what you can classify things under. Because if you're going to do, like, for example, quarterly, then you need statements from quarterly. How do I say this? Let's say it's, what month is it? Let's say it's April right now, right? And you're going to start doing your quarterly taxes. Well, you wouldn't be including any receipts from April, May, or June. You'd be only doing from January, February, and March. Okay. And that's how you would move forward from there. And then if you were backdating, then you would need to backdate on that 1099 if you had that receipt.
Okay.
From when it was from. Okay.
Makes sense.
I really want to ask this question. I'm sorry. Okay, so what about abandoned vehicle?
Same thing.
You have to have the receipt.
You know, the warehouse receipt for cars is really the purchase agreement or the car sticker.
That marina sticker.
Yeah.
So if you're doing 1099s, you're doing it wrong, because if you're trying to use like the retail installment contract, if you look on the window sticker, it says that the window sticker supersedes any portion of any contract that exists. So that's why if you were doing like a discharge with the 1099 and like you weren't getting any results, you probably weren't using the window sticker.
That's because that company still owns that window sticker or that dealership.
Mm-hmm. And you need to get that title, that window sticker into your jurisdiction or your property so you can do such a thing.
Yeah.
Or you have them do it. You know what I mean? Because that's what it's for. Give them that Form 56 and tell them to do it 1099A it. Or just do a 1099C and tell them to cancel the debt for that warehouse sticker.
Right.
Q, what do you have in place for like private tabs?
What do you say?
What do you have in place for like private tabs or plates?
Private tabs or plate? What do you mean by private tabs or plates?
If you wanted to, because you got on your car that you got, you didn't have to have them go get you anything. You did your own. Yeah. How do you do that? Or what did you do exactly?
Oh, hold on. Let me pull up the website. Well, how did I get them to not put plates on the car and like get it without plates?
No, I understand that part. I understand how you didn't do that, but what do you, after you get the car, like after you, or say in my case, I own mine and I don't need those plates no more. I want mine privatized. I don't know what I'm doing though. So how do you go about doing that?
Hold on.
Someone said, let me light this blunt first.
Me, that's me.
I love it.
Higher learning.
That's right.
Yo, Q, I heard you mention Patrick Devine earlier. Have you tapped into that B10 form yet?
Yeah. Man, I have been on that for a little while now, but I haven't actually done it yet, only because I'm trying to get this shit done with my son and put him as the sole beneficiary for my trust and everything like that, and also set up the rest of the family as far as how everything is going to be divvied out. And I have to redo this life insurance policy as well. And I got Raw to speak to about that. But there's so much shit to do, man. And a couple other projects. So it's like I'm working on it, but it's just like slowed down a little bit because I just need to make sure that this beneficiary stuff is done
Yeah, bro.
before I move forward with anything.
Just let me know if you need any help. Anywhere I can help, just let me know.
I got you, man. I got you. I just be trying to take on the world at once. That's my fault.
Like, what is sleep?
Yeah, really, what is sleep? All right. So
I have a question in regards to the value of your assets on your UCC1. So you're saying that you could use this for financing. How are you putting the what it's worth? Like, how are you putting that against, or going to get a loan for whatever the value is of the assets on your UCC?
So perfect. That's actually a good question. So for example, like for verifying, this is akin to like verifying income, because it's foreign sourced and technically speaking, there would be no actual record of it as far as an IRS system could tell, because your bank statements wouldn't show anything like that. You'd have to declare the value on the UCC financing statement, and that would be the record associated for something like that. So, for example, if you have like a bill of sale, right? The bill of sale would actually have the value associated with the car, or the title has the value associated with the car too. The deed to your home has a value associated with it. A good one that people ask a question about is, well, how do you know the value of the birth certificate? Well, you know the value of the birth certificate based on the SEC exchange rate on those type of commodities. Now, regularly they go from 1 million to 5 million per certificate, as far as the government certificates of indebtedness go. And you can use that as a base value for your birth certificate, as an example, for something that doesn't have an associated value with it. Okay, as a beneficiary, you can do an appraisal for it, pretty much. And that's the same thing would go for an example like, what's it, your social security numinant, if people have requested that, or like the application to, if you did a driver's license type ID card or a learner's permit. What's another one that doesn't have an associated value to it? Diploma. The diploma doesn't have an associated value with it. And you can actually declare a value to that if you wanted to. And for the value associated with that, what I have seen people use is the amount that they went to school for.
Ooh. Wow. So you say
But when you say
declare-
diploma, that's also just regular degrees, right? Whether it's
Yeah.
masters, doctors. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that certification, it's a certificate. So it's also evidencing, it's a certificate of completed indebtedness is the way that you can look at it.
And where are you putting this declaration of the amount? Like, are you putting it
On the
next to
UCC,
the?
on the UCC statement. So for example, hold on, let me share my screen with you guys.
Yeah, I was gonna say, are you putting it next to the number that's associated with the instrument? Or...
And don't forget the private tabs or private plates thing.
Yeah, I didn't forget about you.
Okay.
So right here, right? Quasimodo estate business agreement, Wells Fargo account number. Then let's say we're doing, all right, Quasimodo birth certificate number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0, right? And then so that's how I would do that.
And then what's the process for going in the bank? You just bring this and your identifying documents?
Yep, this is how you do. Mm-hmm. And like, for example, right, if you were doing something like this, you declare the value associated with it, and you were trying to do something like depositing this into a bank, you would need to assign this to them, number one, because it would need to be their responsibility. They would need a fiduciary responsibility as well, because you wouldn't be doing this through a normal account. You'd be doing this through the trust account. So this asset is already yours. You need a conveyance of title over to them in the aspects of however you're planning on, doing the transaction. I don't know what kind of deposit you may do. But like, for example, let's say you're doing a special deposit, you may be doing it as an investment, or you actually may be selling this to them completely, taking it off your hands because you have more than one security. You know what I mean? In this aspect. So it really just depends on how you want to handle it. And as far as having multiple birth certificates, that's what that's really for. Some you would authenticate, some you wouldn't. And this is exactly what this would be for, the authentication process. To give it that full faith and credit for its assignment purpose. Makes sense, makes sense. Yes, no? Another question on it?
I was told the banks don't even usually want to, like, they're not even supposed to touch your trust, like, documents. Like, you have to basically tell them, like, state what's in them and stuff like that in certain occasions.
Yeah, for certain locations, yes, that is the case. Some locations may need to see your trust agreement. They may need to see your assets to make sure that you have the way to fund the account. And for example, like I said, you get things appraised if need be. for its declared value.
For those
And
states,
you
can't you? Oh,
say that
sorry.
one more time.
I was saying for those states, can't you show them a memorandum of trust, which doesn't like show your entire trust agreement?
Yeah, you can do that as well if you have one. But I don't think a lot of people do. I mean, does anybody have a memorandum of trust? It's really just a summarized version of what's in your trust.
I do.
No.
Yes.
No. Okay, so that's like having like a pocket birth certificate, pretty much. That one that fits in your wallet is something that you carry around so that you can explain what your trust is without having to actually have your trust agreement on you. And you can use that in place if you're of your trust agreement if you just so happen not to have one for some reason.
Noted.
All right.
Thank you for that.
No problem. And then the last thing I'm going to touch on is the private plates. Okay. I'm trying to find the fucking website that I went to.
Yeah, because I cannot find anything except for how to privatize my plane if I get one.
When you get one.
I was just about to say when.
I was thinking that too. Thanks, guys.
Fucking here we go.
I'm just saying, just let me get a free ride one day. That's all.
Of course.
Okay, here we go. All right, I'm gonna put this inside the chat. I forgot where the hell I got it from, only because my wife was the one who got it for me. But that's where the plates came from. My own private plates. You can put whatever you want on them when you're ordering them.
Thank you.
Gotta show you. Oh no, you put it on there.
I'll put it in the chat.
So can you get those European plates if you wanted to?
Yeah, actually you can. Doesn't really matter. I know the UK does do it. Hold up, there's a website for that too.
And then you would just take these plates, whatever you make it, you put it on your non-UCC.
Mm-hmm.
I can't see your screen, by the way. Q.
Oh, I was just sending it over. So this is the one for UK. If anybody wanted to use the UK one, it works just as fine. That's just where I got mine. 1 second. Just show this really quick, and then it's going to be the last thing before we hop off today's call. All right. So overview, you can buy private personalized registration for your vehicle's number plates from DVLA or from private dealer. If you have the right to a private number that is not currently being used, you can apply to assign it, put it onto a vehicle. So if you wanted, you can definitely do that.
Amazing.
That's fire, Q. Q, I just want to say, because that was the last thing you touched on, this was a fire class. And I want to point out, you went over the trust, gun trust, private plates, receipts. All these things have been sold in other mentorships and groups for at least $100 to $500 a piece. So I just want to say thank you. That was a fire class. It's much appreciated.
No problem. And thank you all for joining today's class. Sorry for the beginner class being late, but my manager is swamped with work and she's doing everything as fast as she can. So please do not for anything. She's working hard and diligently even right now. So that class will be up as well as this class. Just give her a moment to get on that. So next class for the beginner is going to be for courts. So if anybody has anything for court that they want to discuss or go over, you know what I mean? That's what the class is going to be on. Going a little bit deeper into, like, for example, that letter to court that I went over briefly, into more court proceedings. Understanding court procedure is one big thing, and like knowing what you can and can't do during certain periods of time when court is actually going on. When to file paperwork, who you're sending paperwork to, and like the whole nine. Okay, and how it relates to banking and the banking aspect / consumer aspect of it all. All right.
That's fire. That's definitely much needed. Much needed over here, at least. Will you also be going over maybe like a traffic stop? I've yet to see anybody actually break that down at all.
Yep, I'm going over everything. Well, everything for what that time frame allows me. Okay. And then I'm obviously going to have another class on that. And then I'm going to keep doing it on like pretty much in that kind of format. Like maybe instead I'll do it like a week for court, a week for securities, a week for, you know, Q&As and things like that. Change it up ever so slightly, but it's going to be in that kind of format moving forward. Okay.
And then you'll be getting into how to further operate in the private capacity as well, like with the trust, how you supposed to then basically you kind of touched on it now, but like with getting bank accounts with the trust and how you should be operating then from it.
Like what kind of instructions would you be giving to the banker and like different varieties for the different banking scenarios that you might be in?
Yeah, I'm excited, man. That's what's up. Thank you.
So, any homework off the top of your head for the next class?
Any homework? One, checking to see if you guys have your DUNS numbers already. Because if you do, then you can already start establishing your business credit. And we went over a lot of that today as to forms of things that you can start doing now to increase your business credit. So that's one thing. And if you don't have a DUNS number, work on getting it. Okay. What's another thing?
This
What's
is
going on,
Kate.
Kate?
Hey, Nathan, did you give them some non-credit trade accounts that aren't associated with them? If they don't have any, I'll send them to you and they can apply for people who already have their DUNS numbers for some trade
Oh,
accounts.
that's actually a good one, Kate. Can you actually do that?
Yeah, I think I have like 4 or 5 where they don't include their personal information, but they do have to follow the the rules and to actually do it, because it is a business. It's not, you just doing whatever. So
Yeah, I got you. So that's actually perfect. So Kate's gonna provide that. You're gonna do that on Discord or you want to do it on the chat?
I was gonna send them to you and then you can post them
Okay.
inside of Patreon with instructions.
Okay, perfect. Me and you need to have another call anyway, Kate. I'm so sorry with that, but most definitely me and you need to speak again. So if you want to email me that, and then you know what? Before I end the call,
I'll get them to you by Friday. That way,
Okay,
because
perfect.
I know I'm cooking and all that good stuff. So I'm not free till Friday.
I got you. All right, that's perfect. That's perfect. So send that to me when you get a chance. All right.
Will do.
So the homework was the DUNS number so that we can work on our business credit if we don't have it.
You have done the numbers so you can work on your business credit. Establish your trust in estate if you have one or the other, or if you don't have either, start establishing that now. What's another one? Also, if you're doing that, look into life insurance policies as well, because also if you have your estate, you're going to want to learn how to get your death certificate eventually on the presumption of death. Then you're going to need this life insurance policy for the beneficiary as well. Or not you're going to need it, but you're going to want it. Okay.
Are you recommending they do whole life or term? Because I have a fire whole life guide for you to bank on yourself.
Oh, Roz is good too. So it's like, it depends on what your situation is. Okay. Because
I would say in this situation, get term, because you're going to be able to get way more money.
But you gotta think like the Rockefellers and bank on yourself. You don't.
Yeah. But whole life, you're not going to make that much money off banking on yourself.
That's crazy.
I'm sorry, that was funny.
I'm just telling you, I'm a life insurance agent.
Oh, you must have learned from the wrong people, my friend. The wrong people. I'm gonna say, look up Garrett Gunderson.
This is going to be.
No, they have the type of life insurance policies they have. You wouldn't be able to afford right now. Well, I don't know your situation, but
I was about to say.
I don't know your situation, but dependent whole life is not cheap.
It's not about being cheap when you need to be in perfection.
All right.
Good points, guys. Good points. And honestly, this insurance conversation is going to be a good one to have when we're talking about, pretty much funding your life based on insurance purposes. Aside from the private assets and securities that you have.
Yeah, because I'm solely talking about once you kill off your social. You want to have the highest face amount that you could possibly have. Instead of getting a $500,000 payout for a whole life policy, you got a term for $10 million.
You can have a term for over 300 million. We'll talk about insurance when we get there.
Ooh, I like this.
Well, when we do get there, hopefully we can
gotta qualify for that, though. You can have term for as much as you want, but how are you going to qualify for it?
Yeah,
I was going to say, how can we qualify
it with your corporation, because you have to insure your officers.
Yeah, but they're not going to give you 300 million unless you have the assets.
You got to start reading, you guys. Read the documents that are there.
Reading.
We just talked about that though.
And speaking
you'll have
of,
the assets, because we talking about $1 million, $100 million birth certificates and other bonds that we're gonna put inside that trust. So we're gonna have the assets for that
Very
collateral.
true.
Yeah, but we
You
have
know,
to go over how you're gonna, for example, yeah, we're talking about that, and like Rob was saying, you're gonna have to have coin to pretty much prove that you have the money to fund that policy.
Exactly.
But you're gonna need to prove that to them through the non-UCC, the declaration of value, and a couple other things that we, went over and talked about, and that's all in conjunction with doing the death certificate too. And it's like, in that aspect, you may have to liquidate some securities because they may want some in cash and they may want some in securities. And depending on how the situation goes as far as the policy will determine on how you're going to move as far as doing a 300 million or doing a 50 million or doing a 500,000. You know what I mean?
so it's just a lot of steps that go into that. Because I know when I was applying for my whole life, they wanted to see. It's almost like I was applying to grab another property. Like they want to see your income. So if you're
records.
Yeah, so if you're self-employed, I guess my question was gonna be like, okay, how's the way around that then? Because if we're gonna get these big ass policy, like we gotta be able to show we have that money coming in, or I guess they're gonna base it off of the trust, huh? And if
Or
anything, you could just say
assets.
that the trust pays you X $1 million a year or whatever the fuck, and then
well, when we
go
get
about
there,
Because you're not applying for this with your trust. That's what you guys are not understanding. You're applying for
this
this
is-
with your social security number. So the
Mhm.
trust
When you-
assets are completely different. If you have those assets in your trust, you can say, hey, I got these assets, but you don't own them. The trust does.
when
Ex-
we get to the insurance, like I said, I have a guy that you guys can talk to, and he will tell you exactly how you want to do what you need to do, what you need to do, and how. And you can tell him, I have $1 a month, I have $5 a month, I have this, and he'll say, this is exactly what you need.
Okay, so we can, if we can actually get Ra and him on a call one day, and we can actually have like an insurance call, specifically on that would actually be great.
That would be so awesome, because he'd be like, oh, look at all my potential earnings. Okay? But yeah, that'd be
seriously,
awesome.
because
No, seriously,
could-
I'll ask him. He's amazing.
And Ra, if you'd be interested in doing something like that, you can talk privately about that too.
Yeah, of course, bro. And then I would have go over you with that B10 form because that shit
Yeah.
is promising.
Yes, most definitely, man. All right, so that's it for today's
Oh yeah,
class.
yeah.
Yep, that's it for today's class. Thank you everyone for joining. I appreciate your time. This class will be posted on, just to give my manager some time, like I said before. And I will see you guys all again if you're able to join on the 28th. All right.
All right.
thank you, Q.
Have a good one.
Happy eating,
Have a good night.
everybody.
Thank you all. Bye.
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 See ya. Bye. Have a good one, everyone.